It's a start.
Nice to see you, Mike.
Thank you.
Yeah, good to see you.
Glad to be here. I probably won't say much.
Did a bridge run this morning, ready to get you back out there, Michael.
I'm ready, man. I am ready.
So we're just waiting for the mayor to jump in. Rick, do you know if the mayor's available and ready to go?
Yeah, should be, but let me go see.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
He's on a phone call. He should be up, he should be off in a minute, but why don't you just start, Peter?
Okay. All right. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is the Public Safety Committee calling the order of the meeting of September the 8th, 2020. We have a quorum present of all of our committee members. And I see that we have also joining us Council Members Jackson and Appel. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us. I'm going to take a moment of a personal privilege and take over the moment of silence. In the Catholic tradition, today is the feast day of the Blessed Mother. So I thought I would didn't go to church today, which I would normally do under normal circumstances. So this is a special prayer in our hearts to the patron saint of Lebanon, which is the Blessed Mother, and we can have a moment of silence. Thank you very much. All right, one of the things that I neglected to put onto the agenda was an update on emergency management preparation. It was on our agenda for our last committee meeting, and I received a telephone call from Shannon Scaff. So I would entertain a motion that we amend our agenda to add an update from Shannon on emergency management. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay. All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. So Shannon, I'm gonna lead off with you since I got your attention and you got a lovely American flag on your face mask covering. Can you give us a quick update on the emergency management? We're in September the 8th, so we're into the storm season full-fledged. So what can you update us on, Shannon?
Yes, sir. Thank you for the opportunity, and good afternoon to everyone. First and foremost, I'll go ahead and let everyone know, if you don't already, that we are, as an emergency management division, rolling into the Charleston Fire Department. That move has already begun and will be official on January 1. And the biggest reason for that is to support the ongoing growth of emergency management, and working under Chief Curia and the fire department. We feel very confident that we'll be able to grow in the way that we need to. As you just mentioned a moment ago, sir, we are approaching the peak of hurricane. If we're not in it already. And by now you're all very well aware of the hard work of our hurricane task force last several months. As we continue to navigate the COVID crisis, we've been able to kind of divide and conquer. So again, thanks to each one of those professionals. I see Tony Curtel on the phone, and all the work that's being done there. I have a quick brief for you, just to kind of give you an overall sense of where my head is right now as we move under Chief Curia and the fire department. My top 10 hazards that I look at, and keep in mind the 4 phases of emergency management. That's mitigation, preparedness, response, and recovery. We could have a full-time staffer focused on each one of those things, and there would be enough work for 60 hours a week. each one of them is very, very important to our emergency management profession overall. But when you consider the vulnerability assessment that's done, the city of Charleston, you think about the vulnerabilities, the hazards in Charleston. Of course, we all know about flooding, tropical cyclones. Just in the 2 years that I've been with the city, we've had Florence, Michael, Dorian, and now Isaias, among others. We've had tornadoes. Of course, we all know about the situation with the ongoing opinions with an earthquake and how Charleston may be overdue for something like that. Fire, hazmat, severe winter weather, transportation failures, obviously civil disorder, infections and pandemic diseases. When I first came on board with you all, I did a review of our hazards for myself. And it's interesting, some of the ones that were sort of buried down have now become kind of our top contenders in the year 2020. So we're definitely operating in a fluid environment over here in emergency management. Moving on into kind of a second list of hazards, again, mitigation, preparedness, response, and recovery. For each one of these, you begin to look at the world of work that we're faced with every day with a staff of now 3, as Mike Tito has officially joined your emergency management group for the city. Special events, right? We know about the bridge run every year. That takes about 75 different organizations from across the state to pull that thing off. And our very own Daniel Flessis is the planning section chief for all of those disciplines, for all of those jurisdictions for the entire event. So for 4 months out of the year, Daniel is face down into the bridge run, as am I. Mass casualty events, sea level rise and tidal flooding, heat wave and drought, terrorism, mass murders, active threats, a dam failure is another one that we need to be prepared for, and we exercise regularly with our partners on. A maritime incident, cyber incidents, tsunami, and aircraft incident. So the list is rather lengthy there on some of the vulnerabilities that I've got to plan and prepare for the city of Charleston with the staff of 3. The recurring issues that we've seen of that list since 2015, flooding, tropical cyclones, as we just talked about, tornadoes. We know Johns Island and other areas have been hit the last few years. We've had some hazmat incidents. We've had severe winter weather. And it's noteworthy to say that, of course, with Hibben United Methodist Church in Mount Pleasant and some of the details of their operation coupled up with the county work camp, some of the warming shelter options that we've had have been sort of taken off the table this coming year. So we've got some work to do to address that. The civil disorder, obviously being in the middle of COVID, special events, and terrorism, all since 2015 have been things that we've had to contend with directly as a city team. In those same 5 years, we've done a multitude of exercises to prepare ourselves for some of these contingencies, including flooding workshops. Obviously, we try to do a hurricane exercise every year with the team. Bridge run and counterterrorism is something that we work through every single year. We do the dam break exercise, mass care, and mass casualty. So very busy on the exercises front. And of course, that's not just City of Charleston. That's all of our partners in the Low Country that come together. And I'm very proud of those partnerships. Preparedness work continuing with the COVID ramp up. We conducted some training with CDOs, shift commanders from the fire department to establish some protocols for flooding. By now, you all have heard of the level 3, 2, 1 flooding. We want professionals from fire and police speaking the same language as emergency management does, so we can be on the same page as we are approaching one of these rain bomb type situations. We've worked really hard to establish the virtual, by way of what we're seeing right now. This is the kind of the way we've done business over the last several months, is to do virtual activations. We've done a number of training events, and obviously a heavy lift for us is the media as well, with ongoing interviews and press conferences and things. Some of the stuff that's deferred that I want to focus on, an emergency operations plan for the city that addresses the contingencies that we've just talked about. that really helps to support the vulnerability assessment. The last one that was done and was officially assigned was by Mayor Riley in the late 80s. We would like to be able to continue outreach. Councilmember Shade, you invited me along with you on your Saturday morning meeting with your constituents. Really appreciated that opportunity. Normally by this time of year, we have, Daniel and I have gone out and met with folks throughout the city on their turf and HOA meetings and churches and other things to really kind of spread the message of preparedness for the city. Obviously in 2020 with COVID being what it is, we have not been able to do that. So that's been sort of deferred, and I'm really looking for some innovative ways to try to connect with our citizens, and would be open to any suggestions you all have in terms of that. In years past, I think we heavily relied on police and fire during major contingencies to help us during activations. Well, we continue to do that, but notice that beginning after Florence, we started to bring in other professionals from other departments to help us activate. And they brought in a great amount of talent with them, and everybody from stormwater, public service, and others, to really sort of take some of that pressure off police and fire so they could focus on the things that they need to. So we're looking to train those folks, give them the tools that they need so they can really succeed in their positions during a contingency. Mike Tito, now part of our staff, is going to be in charge of that training tracking for the entire city. It's a big job, and luckily fire already has something like that established for themselves. So we're going to really mirror what's already been done. We know about the mitigation work that goes on around the city, pumps and pump stations, seawall, and other things. But two that I would really kind of like to highlight right now that are on my wish list in emergency management is signs and sensors for flood-prone intersections, which we've already begun to do. Very, very thankful for that work, but also looking at variable message signs that maybe help our motorists to see that there's a situation they could potentially be driving into, and maybe, you know, turn around, don't drown. Those variable message signs are critically important, I think, to the overall operation of keeping people out of harm's way. And so I'd really like to dig into that a little bit more. The response work is ongoing. Tidal flooding, excessive rainfall notifications, and coordination. We work very closely with Councilmember Seekings and others to continue to improve how we provide services and emergency management. It's sort of a moving target, but I feel like we've really come a long way in the 2 years that I've been here as a result of all the hard work of the entire team with really dialing in on that level 3, 2, 1 flooding actions. We've talked extensively about COVID and the incident management team and the civil unrest. What I will highlight to finish up is debris management, working with public service to really establish a sustainable, reliable debris management contract that if we do see a major storm system this year, we're confident moving forward in the recovery process. So how are we looking and moving forward? Well, in a perfect world, I've got a staff that can really address those 4 phases: mitigation, preparedness, response, and recovery, particularly that recovery piece. It's the longest, most painful of all of them. They tend to go months, if not years, with recovery. So having someone that's really focused on that would be tremendous for us. Moving into the fire department, we're making sure that our positions are, in terms of HR, where they're supposed to be and how they're described. I'm looking to establish a response duty officer rotation between our 2 emergency management specialists so that they can be boots on the ground and represent emergency management at some of these contingencies that we have in real time at 2, 3 in the morning. Some things that they can do to really support both our police department and fire department while they're actually on scene. That's really just kind of as briefly as I can make it, just kind of give you a broad overview of where my head is as we shift into fire. Be happy to take any questions, comments, concerns from you.
Thanks, Shannon. That was a very quick update, and appreciate your rapid presentation with that. And I am very supportive of the idea of moving you over to the fire department. I think that makes perfect sense. Coordination is an absolute key. Any member of the committee have any questions for Shannon? Yes, sir, Mr. Seekings.
Just very briefly, Shannon, thank you for all your hard work. I mean, there's so much thought that goes into all this, and I appreciate it. And you talked about your wish list and the top of your wish list. I think for me, and I think for all of us, the variable messaging signs rather than the permanent signs that have only one message on and off are probably better for a number of different reasons. And I think the time that we're living in now tells you one of them, and that is we have a lot of things to tell people. But as you know, those permanent signs that say the same thing and then flash on and off send out a message in certain communities that are tough. So I just think we should think through how we get those signs out there for public safety without getting in the way of people's property and their values. So I think you know where I'm coming from on that.
And that's a very good point, Councilman Seekings. I
Thank you.
think we need to reinforce that message as well. Councilmember Shealy or Sacramento? Councilmember Shealy?
Yeah, I just wanted to tell Shannon, thank you. You know, the detailed preparations that you've done are incredible. And, you know, we just appreciate it. It's one of those things, when you're seen on TV, it's bad times, things are bad. But because of the preparations and the way you deliver that, people understand the preparations and they feel a lot better when you do finish up with the media. So I just want to thank you for all the hard work and preparation you've done here. So thank you.
I appreciate that. It definitely takes a team. I'm very proud of the team, and thank you for the comment.
All right. Any other questions or comments? And or other? Jason? Okay. All right. Well, Shannon, thank you, and I appreciate you jumping in on that and adding that to our agenda. By the way, I didn't mention we're deferring our minutes from the August 11th meeting, and then we'll move into item 3, which is an update on arrests and prosecutions from the events of May 30, 31st, and May 31st. And I think Susan Herdina from our legal department is going to jump in here. And let me tell you, I think this question came from Councilmember Shealy to put us on the agenda, and I'm very pleased that he has asked this question to address. And I just want to make a quick comment about our role on public safety. We're here to provide oversight of our police, fire, emergency management, and municipal court operations. But I mean this in my lawyer hat's on a little bit, I'm afraid, that we just have to be mindful that we're not here to intrude into the decision-making process of prosecutors and the judicial business. I commented about that earlier publicly, and that's just an important component of our system of government, of separation of the 3 branches of government, and from the United States Constitution down to us, and applies to us. But we do have a very important role of oversight and to ask questions, to find out to be transparent as to how things are developing, what decisions were being made, and why. And that's certainly within our purview. So with that comment, I'm going to just ask Susan if she would go ahead and give us an update as to the arrests and prosecutions. And I think you can focus, Susan, on the Sunday, May 31st, more so than anything else. And we got Chief Reynolds and other members of the police department on board. And before I turn it over to Susan, just one more comment in case you have not seen it. I was on the phone earlier with the United States Attorney Peter McCoy. And as you may have heard, several of the folks who were involved, the higher level violent offenders were indicted or charged with what's called an information in federal court. Some of them have entered or about to enter guilty pleas to those charges. Of the 6, 2 I believe are from the Columbia area riots and being handled in that division of the U.S. Attorney's Office, and 4 of the 6 are directly related to the folks down here in Charleston. So, and I understand more are to come, but I just want to tell you about my conversation I had with Mr. McCoy earlier this morning after I saw the news of that breaking, and that is something important for us to remember, that the folks who created the hardcore violence on the night of May 31st have been charged federally, and some of them are going to be convicted of that by their entry of a plea. So Susan, I'll let you take it over from there. Thank you.
Sure, thank you. Committee members, good afternoon. As Councilmember Shade said, Chief Reynolds is going to discuss the status of the arrests and the charges that were made on the evening of May 30th to 31st, which was when the city really saw the violence and the unrest in the city. I would like to talk about very briefly this afternoon the municipal court arrests. And I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you because I felt that there was some misinformation that has been circulating in public, and therefore felt it was important to distinguish what was transpiring on the charges of the 30th from those that were in municipal court on the 31st. So on May 31st, that afternoon and early evening, there were 47 arrests that were made on municipal charges. And there also on that day was a general sessions charge, a drug charge, but I'm not going to talk about that this afternoon. Of those 47 arrests on the municipal charges, the vast majority of those were failure to obey a lawful order. And that was for failing to leave Marion Square when they were asked to do that. And there were a few arrests made later in that day for failing to comply with the curfew ordinance that you all passed. The vast majority of these arrests involved people who were engaged in civil disobedience that was nonviolent. In several of these cases, the protesters did act violently, throwing a bottle at a police officer, resisting arrest, or interfering with the arrest of other defendants. Just so you know, all the persons who were arrested on these municipal charges spent the night in jail. All were required to post a bond of $465 at least. And the majority of the defendants were local and young. Once the arrests were made, the process moves from the police department over to the prosecutors and the court, which, as Councilmember Shade just talked about, and we all know, is an independent branch of our local government. These cases were originally scheduled to be heard on June 16th in municipal court, but the prosecutor's office requested a continuance. And the reason for that was the prosecutor wanted to review each body cam that existed, each record that was generated by the police officers. They needed to gather the supplemental reports from cooperating jurisdictions who had assisted in the arrests, and also talk to the police officers and review all the facts. Between the arrest date and then August 31, when some of these cases were dismissed, and I'm going to get into that in a second, an attorney for the police department, Steve Rummelin, and our prosecutor, Will Bryant, sat down and went through each and every case and spent hours on each case. And these are not new lawyers or young lawyers or naive lawyers. These are both lawyers who have served as prosecutors here and Will in Columbia for a number of years. And it was their job at that point to look at the facts objectively. Based upon that, on August 31, 27 cases were recommended by the prosecutor to the court to be dismissed, and the court agreed. 12 cases were recommended not to be dismissed, and the court agreed and continued them. Of the cases that were dismissed, and this is the most important thing I want to tell you all to clarify what's been said, is none of the cases that were dismissed involved throwing bricks, vandalizing property, spray painting buildings, looting, or hurting anyone. No cases were dismissed involving arrests that were made on May 30th and the mornings of May 31, which Chief Reynolds is going to talk about. Each case was presented individually to the municipal court judge with a recommendation. Now, many factors were taken into account by the prosecutor during this 3-month period. And the exercise that the prosecutor went through was the one that any prosecutor goes through on a regular basis, whether it's Scarlett Wilson or a prosecutor in North Charleston or municipal court. In this particular case, what they looked at was, what Will looked at and the office looked at, was that no one resisted arrest. They were peaceful. They had been exercising their First Amendment right, and each case involved a nonviolent, peaceful protesting activity. They had spent the night in jail. They were required to post a cash bond. There were no new charges that were pending against any of these cases that had been dismissed during this 3-month period of time. The vast majority were young people with no criminal record, and no one who had their case dismissed in court on the 31st of August had been arrested or had any outstanding warrants or had any cases pending involving what occurred the prior night or an engagement illegally in any kind of a riot or civil disobedience before that time. All these factors were taken into consideration, and it was the job of the prosecutor to make a recommendation which he felt was serving justice, and it was ultimately the court to decide whether or not that justice had been served. And that is where we are at this point with these cases. As I said, there's a number that have not been dismissed and won't be dismissed until a further review of the facts are involved. Those were the cases that had some element of either violence, throwing a bottle at an officer, or resisting arrest, or something of that nature. So I know there have been questions raised about this, and as I said, some misinformation in the public and in things that I read on Facebook page. So I just felt it was important to address the committee, and I appreciate the opportunity to do that. Thank you.
Susan, thank you for that presentation. Council committee members, we can go on to the next phase of the report from Chief Reynolds before we ask questions, if that's okay with y'all. I think I'd have more of a, okay. So Chief Reynolds, you want to pick up from where Ms. Dina left off regarding, her focus was on the afternoon and early evening of May 31st, and you may want to give us an update as to the other arrests that took place on May 30 and into the early hours of May 31st.
Yes, so that's when the greatest amount of violence, destruction of property, assaults, arson, and a variety of other things that occurred. Not the peaceful part of the protest, the violent criminal element of this protest. Before I give a tally of our investigative efforts and talk about what we've done, I think it's important that I recognize our partners who've helped in a variety of ways with the deployment and keeping our city safe, not only the night of the 30th, but since then, among the primary partners being the Sheriff's Department in both Charleston and Berkeley counties, Mount Pleasant, North Charleston, and there was other agencies to include SLED and others who've been helping us ever since. I also want to recognize our fire department, who's integral in helping us in putting out the fires and keeping our city from having further damage. They were with us that night and have been with us every night since then as requested, and they've been really kind of tied at the hip with the police department and our command structure, what we call the PSOC, our operations center. Dan himself, Curia, the fire chief, and his deputy chiefs and others have been there every time that we've had a deployment to make sure that we're communicating and doing everything possible to deploy effectively to keep our city safe. I also, when I talk about the prosecutions of these cases, it's important to note that any case, and I want to say this clearly because it's important to note, any case involving an arson, involving theft and burglaries, involving any type of assault of a resident, a merchant, a police officer, any vandalism, destruction of property case, I'll talk about how many we've identified and what the status of those are being prosecuted the fullest extent of the law, to include, as our chair, Peter Shea shared a moment ago, from the U.S. Attorney's Office. So I want to talk about some of the people that are helping us from the day this happened with our investigation, and to get these cases as far along as they are right now, to identify the perpetrators of these crimes. The U.S. Attorney's Office, starting at the top with Peter McCoy. I actually met in person with the Attorney General Barr of the United States, along with our U.S. Attorney Peter McCoy, along with Alan Wilson, and along with Senator Tim Scott. And in that meeting, they shared their full support for the prosecution of these cases. And they have made good on their commitment and made good on their word to make sure that we get as many federal adoptions as possible, because in the federal side, we tend to get significant jail time, which is what these offenders need, in my personal opinion. And that's what I've advocated for from day one. I also want to recognize our solicitor, Scarlett Wilson, who I've had multiple conversations with, who she assigned from day one, her, I think, a very, very strong prosecutor in the solicitor's office, Dave Osborne, who has an umbrella responsibility to track and execute all of these cases. So there's organization and none fall through the cracks. Very active support continues from the FBI and the ATF in every one of these cases. And now I'll read to you a tally of a status of where we're at right now. And I want to lastly thank the members of the Charleston Police Department, who selflessly, from the day that this happened on the 30th, have not put down their pencils, have not put down their phones, have not stopped investigating, have reached out to the merchants, we've had a tip line in place and a whole variety of other mechanisms to communicate with our communities, to solicit and get every single tip that we could get, to include videos that were taken that night of the assaults, of the arsons, of the vandalisms, of the thefts, and a variety of other things that we know occurred that night. The violence that occurred in our city, the picture of that, if you will, that was incited by these individuals, these criminals who came to our city and perpetrated these crimes. So I literally have had investigators who would not go home, who worked on their days off, who have not stopped working since the day that this happened. And I assure you, we have not taken our foot off the gas pedal when it comes to these criminal assaults, these criminal cases, and the prosecution to the fullest extent of the law, and getting them as much jail time as possible. We have 90 arrest warrants that have been issued to date. One of those was an incident that occurred on the 31st. In addition to that, a part of that was an incident that occurred in Marion Square on the 31st. Total number of offenders is 31, and an additional 5 offenders for on-view arrests that occurred during the riots. Total number of warrants served so far is 74 warrants, 16 are still outstanding. Total number of offenders who have been arrested, 26 offenders, and in addition to that, the 5 on-view arrests. The total number of offenders with federal charges, 4 of which were announced today by the U.S. Attorney Peter McCoy and his team in their press release, as was referenced earlier, for our city and the riots that occurred here. There was additional riots and civil unrest and similar damage that occurred in Columbia, and there were indictments that were issued today based on those events in Columbia, and suspects that were identified and charged in Columbia for federal charges. We have, I believe, at least one additional likely federal case that we're working with the ATF on currently as well. Of these federal charges, 2 were related to the riots, 2 were related to arsons, and 1 was a gun charge that was also related to a previous incident that tied a previous charge and incident to the what happened on the 30th. Total state charges for arson, we have 9. 2 were for retail stores. There's more under investigation. 5 were for an arson to a police car. 2 were for an attempt to burn. Of the burglaries, we have 46 charges. Of inciting a riot, a felony statute, we have 3 charges. Of assault and battery, we have 10 charges, 2 to citizens and 8 to police officers. And one of those was an assault that occurred on Sunday in Marion Square. And we have 22 charges for damage to property, and nearly all of those cases are general sessions charges. That's my update in terms of the prosecution.
Thank you, Chief Reynolds. So I'm going to start with Councilmember Seekings and see if he has any questions for either Mr. Dina or for Chief Reynolds.
So, well, thank you for the update. I actually took a quick look at what the U.S. Attorney's Office sent out today too. It's interesting. I mean, it's interesting sort of all the different working parts to all this. I think one of the things, just thinking out loud, that sort of led to sort of this conversation and sort of the extended portion of the conversation is the investigation side sort of internally out. And to the extent there's any reports on that going forward, I know that's something y'all have been working on, that we just need to make that part of our sort of report going from there. But thank you for all your hard work. It's just interesting times that we live in, and it's been fascinating to sort of see the makeup of the crowd that took it from peaceable protests to violence, and that, you know, a lot of that's local. And I think, to me, Chief, it just solidifies even more the necessity for us to get out there in the community and get our relations to the best place they can possibly be. I just think that's the long-term message from all of this. You know, all this background noise about importing people and all that, you know, these are local people, and we need to make sure we're all on the same page going forward. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Seekings. Councilmember Shealy?
Thank you,
I
Mr.
guess that
Chairman.
really wasn't a question, by the way. Sorry.
Yeah, mine's not really a question either. I don't guess it's more of a statement. But you know, first of all, what happened to George Floyd is totally unacceptable. Racial injustice needs to come to an end. We need to do whatever we can there. There are people that protested peacefully, lawfully, and then there's those that went beyond that. But I understand what they were protesting. However, when a group of people, you know, knowingly and deliberately breaks the laws and ordinances that are set by our city council, by our mayor to protect our city, and when our police officers make it clear to them that they're breaking the law, and they give them an opportunity to comply, and they not only ignore them, but many of them yell back defiantly, they need to be held accountable for their actions. You know, we've got some good judges in Charleston that come up with creative ways of making sure that non-violent people who've made a mistake understand their mistake and they learn from it without having harsh penalties. And we also have opportunities to go through pretrial intervention to help non-violent people understand, you know, where they went wrong, allow them to understand how they can accomplish things without breaking the law. Our officers put their lives on the line every day. Their spouses and families obviously worry about them, particularly in times like this. And when they do their jobs and they make arrests to protect our city, I just believe that we should back them up on that. And obviously I'm talking about the 31st here. We called in support for from other surrounding jurisdictions. On that night of May 31st, they did an outstanding job of helping keep our city safe. And I just believe we should have backed up our partners and supported their efforts, and we could have done better, could have done much better than dropping the charges. We could have come up with something creative. And I don't know, I just feel like we could have done better than that. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you for those comments, Councilmember Shealy. Councilmember Sacron?
Thank you,
Any
Chairman.
comments or questions?
Yeah, just one comment, one quick question. Just want to echo, you know, Councilman Shealy. I think you all did a wonderful job given the circumstances. And I think we can continue to push the narrative, the truth, which is there is a difference between the protests and the riots. I think in our heated political environment, folks are trying to, put those together and create an argument that it's the same folks. And I was there that day, and it was completely different crowds. I'm glad that we're making that distinction. I'm also glad we're making the distinction that these folks weren't bussed in from other places. And to Councilman Seeking's point, we've got some work to do internally in our city, and I think the special commission that we have can get to work on that. Question, just from a communication standpoint, this is really for Councilman Shahid. As this information comes out, as a member of this committee, I would welcome that information, because I think part of my job as a council person, just a regular citizen, is to nullify some of the misguided information that's shared in our community. And I could be an echo and a voice for what I see, to be the truth. So when these arrests are made, it'd be great to get that report in an email that I can help share and kind of be a voice for clarity, and I guess a voice of facts. So that's my request.
Okay, and Councilmember Sackett, I appreciate those comments, and I think you're 100% accurate that we want to be open and transparent about what happened, and these numbers that were reported to us from Ms. Ordina and from Chief Reynolds. I've tried to write down as fast as I could all those numbers, but if there's a document that we can disseminate to the rest of the council, that would be helpful, so that the public is fully aware of these. These are numbers. These are just hardcore statistics as to the number of arrests, the ones that were dismissed, the ones that are pending. If you could break that down for us, I think that would be very helpful. Thanks for bringing that up.
Well, I guess, I'm sorry, Chairman, I guess my question is when those decisions are made. So I guess, when did that information become available? Would have been helpful to have some of that last week. Today, I took notes. I have all the information for today. I guess when the information is relevant and it starts to get out into the public sphere, I think that's when we should be taking the opportunity to correct.
A little more heads up is what you're asking for.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. Duly noted. Yeah. And I think that going forward, any other developments that are coming down the pipe that we know about, if you could let me know, or let us council know, that would be a big help to us as well. So if we know something's about to unfold, as soon as we can find out. Mr. Mayor?
Thank you,
Yes,
Mr.
Mr. Mayor.
Chairman. And I just want to offer my thanks to our police department, Chief Reynolds, and all our collaborative partners that Chief Reynolds mentioned, from our neighboring jurisdictions of Mount Pleasant, North Charleston, the Sheriff Department, SLED, FBI, U.S. Attorney's Office, all those amazing collaborations to doggedly pursue the criminals who brought violence to our city. And so I can't thank y'all enough for your efforts, and I think this whole body does. Appreciate it.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As a courtesy to Councilmember Jackson and Councilmember Appel, and I saw that Harry joined us on at 1:30 after Susan Herdina gave her report. But I'll start with Councilmember Jackson. If you have a question or comment.
Thank you. I really just came on because as the committee members have wisely said, this is out in public. People are curious. People are believing things that they read on their own social media. So I totally agree that as much accurate information as we can put out on a regular basis before we're asked, I think it's really in everyone's best interest. And I'm personally very proud to be a member of our community and to be served so well by the CPD and, as you said, all of the collaborating partners that we have. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilmember Appel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just joined today to listen in, and I've had a lot of my questions and concerns addressed by our staff and as well as our fellow council members that serve on the committee. And I just want to echo Councilmember Jackson's remarks. I mean, there's just so much. We live in an age where there's so much misinformation. There's so much spin. There's so much agendas. There's so much politics. It's just wonderful to actually listen to facts from the people that know what they're talking about. And I do think that we've got the facts. We've got, an account of what happened. And I think that it's incumbent upon us to perhaps find more ways and more proactive ways, perhaps, to get that message out. So I appreciate everybody's hard work and dedication to our city. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Councilman Griffin, did you want to make a comment or ask a question?
Yes, I appreciate you acknowledging me, Councilmember Shayed. I was just wondering if you could fill me in, Susan, again, I'm sorry I missed your report, Mr. Dina, but I was wondering if our prosecutor was on the line, because I could have sworn somebody had told me that he would be available to answer questions, or is he on the line, or?
He's not on the line, but Steve Rumlin is available. He was very much a part. You missed the report by Ms. Rodina. I don't want to go back over her report, but if you have a question from either Ms. Rodina or Ms. Rumlin or Steve Rumlin, we'll take that from you now.
Well, there's no point in, because if my question that I'm going to ask is going to ask her to go over her report again, I guess I will wait until that report is given at council, or the summary at least, and save my question on that for city council. I did have a discussionary item on the city council agenda. Was hoping that, I could get y'all's feedback from this committee, and of course the chief and the mayor. I would like to see a public hearing where we as a council can ask questions on the record and get some feedback from some of our business owners about those riots. And I'm just wondering whether or not what y'all think of that idea.
We're going to have item number 5 on our agenda. It's an update for the action review. After action review, we will hit that on that in a few seconds. So hang on the line, and we'll come to that in just a few seconds.
Sure, thank you.
Councilmember Griffin, if you'd like to call me after this meeting is over, I'm happy to summarize what I told the committee a few minutes ago.
Okay, thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, any other comments or questions from members of the committee? Then we'll move into the our one and only Lieutenant Dan Riccio on our face covering ordinance enforcement.
Thank you, Councilman. Livability and tourism officers are continuing mask enforcement efforts. As I mentioned before,
Dan, it's kind of hard to hear you, Dan. It's kind of hard to hear you for some reason. Maybe
is that better?
Yes.
Better. Okay.
Yes.
Livability and tourism officers are continuing mask enforcement efforts. As I mentioned in the past, I have assigned one officer who is solely dedicated to answering any concerns or complaints, either generated through the citizen service desk, which is our main number for city complaints, and through our office with these types of violations, also to include social distancing concerns as well. To date, livability and tourism officers have issued 41 criminal court summonses for mask violations. Hopefully this week, I believe this week, new signage requiring the mandate for mask or face coverings will be installed on King Street, throughout the King Street area as an added measure to notify the public that the ordinances do exist and are in play. And we have continued to coordinate with the police department, Chief Reynolds and his staff, who cover obviously nighttime issues. And that's about all I have for the update.
And maybe I didn't hear you, Dan, but did you give us a number as to the number of citations issued to date?
41 criminal summonses have been issued to date by livability and tourism staff.
Okay. Thank you. Is there any questions from any member of the committee for Dan?
So Dan, I think it's just you and your karma. I'm sitting here and a carriage just went by my house as we're speaking, and you saw me, I just jumped up. It is the first carriage that's gone by my house that everyone has been wearing a mask. So you must be doing something right. It's taken a while, but so mark date and time. We finally had a full carriage. Everybody had a mask on. So I'm giving you full credit for that.
Well, I appreciate that. They have been educated with several summonses throughout the industry. So I think that probably can contribute to that success.
I just thought I had an aha moment for you. I was going to take a picture and send it to you, but
I appreciate that.
yeah.
Any other committee members have a question for Dan? Any of my other council members who are on the call?
Mr.
Yes, sir,
Chairman,
Mr. Mayor. I see you.
I guess I'd like to thank Dan and his team as well, and remind everyone that the main focus of this whole matter of the mask ordinance has been tried to seek compliance and safety. And thankfully, over the last 2 months now, we've seen our numbers go down markedly and the number of cases. I think today's numbers are the lowest I've seen since back in May. And maybe that's because not many people are getting checked out on Labor Day, but so maybe it'll level out by the end of the week. But we have seen a market drop, particularly in the city zip codes, in number of cases, and compliance has been increasing. So even though there's been a lot of focus about the number of tickets given, the compliance and the net effects to public health and safety is the paramount issue here.
Actually, Mr. Chairman, I do appreciate, I thought of one question. I'm sure we all received what I thought was a very poignant email from the gentleman who owns the barbershop on Broad Street. To me, it was like the epitome of what we're seeing, you know, as Councilmember Appel said, in the social media diatribes and people's pretty vocal opinions about wear a mask, don't wear a mask, all of that. So I think maybe it would be helpful to clarify this owner says that he and his employees are complying 100% with our mask enforcement ordinance, but they have many customers who choose not to. And so if we could just assure him, and then they also have customers that, you know, are complaining that people aren't wearing a mask and walking out because there aren't masks being worn by the customers. But if we could just assure this gentleman that when you send an officer in for enforcement purposes into an establishment, and as long as the employees and the owner are doing everything possible to obey the ordinance, we are not issuing citations if the customers are negligent. Is that correct?
Yes, that would be correct. I'm not sure of this particular complaint. If you want to forward it to me, I'll definitely get it.
Well, thank you.
And yes, individuals inside or owners or employees, managers, basically, they are responsible to have the masks on, and they can be issued a citation if they don't. However, they're not responsible for enforcing their customers, but they're strongly encouraged to do everything possible to send that message with signage and reminders. But feel free for any business to call us and say, come on in and take a look. We have not had that particular request yet, but we are certainly will accommodate if we do get that request.
Thank you. I will forward you his email. Thanks.
Okay.
Thank you, Councilmember Jackson. And Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Seekings, I understand that President Hsu from the College of Charleston is joining us for our council meeting today. the College of Charleston still online. And I think that's part of the discussion that they're having. I'm not very proud of my alma mater leading the state and maybe almost the country in the number of college students in Columbia with COVID-19 cases and the number of the quarantine that they're doing up in Columbia. It's unfortunate. And there was an article of major universities throughout the country with a high rise in COVID-19 cases kicking into gear because students are coming back and are having parties and social gatherings. So it is clearly a spike in those college towns that are creating a problem across the country. Councilman Seekins, did you want to add something to that? Or
I saw the mayor had his hand up. I'll follow the mayor.
Yeah.
Well, I know, Mr. Chairman, you go to cheer on those Gamecocks every season, you know, hoping they'll be number one.
Not in that regard, though, Mr. Mayor.
Careful what you wish for.
That's true.
So, Mr. Chairman, thanks for bringing that up. And I'm going to let President Chu tonight speak for himself because he speaks very eloquently about sort of their role as good citizens and partners with the city as they repopulate the peninsula with up to and including 10,000 students. And certainly your alma mater has not made his job any easier, for sure. And I've actually noticed my street seems to be a good example of lots of things going on today. A lot of students coming back on campus and living in off campus housing. So he's got some observations and some points he's going to make tonight, which I'll let him make. But I think that we can work with the college as we move forward through the next few months of uncertainty with COVID and put some things in place that aren't draconian, but do help them with their mandate that their students wear masks. They're requiring that they do it. They're making it an academic offense if they don't, but they can only go so far. So let's listen to what he has to say. But I think we can give him some help along the route. And I think his public safety people can help us.
Yeah. Good point. We'll wait to that. Those comments later on.
If Chief Reynolds is still on, I don't know if you're going to be on City Council tonight, but just for his report, it may be worth just taking a listen or talking to Chip about sort of their thoughts about partnering up, because without putting too much more workload on you because you have too much, I do think that there's some partnering we can do with them as these now 10,000 new residents of the city come back into place in the next week or so.
Yep.
Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you, Councilmember Seekins and Mayor, for those comments. Any other council members with a question or comment? Okay. All right, Chief, you're on item number 5. Which is an update on the after action review of the timeline for May 31st.
So we began work immediately after the events of the 30th, the 31st. We do try to do an after action of just about everything we do. And obviously this is a big event that had a huge impact on our city, on our department, on many people in the business community and our residential communities, et cetera, all of our partners. So we began work in June, gathering information. We've formed committees, and we've had continuous work amidst the ongoing protests. I think last check, just since we started permitting again, we've permitted over 40 different protests, and that's not to mention all the pop-up events and a variety of other things. So we have a very high op tempo in our department right now, not just related to civil unrest and protests, but a variety of other things. And during that period, our command, the command of that incident we have meetings scheduled next week. In addition to a variety of meetings that we've had already, we have conducted, and I'll just go out on a limb and say, spent hundreds of hours between our attorneys and our command and a variety of other entities, meticulously reviewing tapes and body camera video, and have spent a lot of work learning from this and discussing it and making sure that we continue to build a strong response. A report will be compiled and presented to the Public Safety Committee before it's released, and it's scheduled to be completed by the end of September, which is kind of what we've been talking about over the last couple months. and presented prior to the October City Council meeting. We will present among the, if you will, just kind of a frame of what we want to present will be visual presentation of hour-to-hour activity during the protest and the civil unrest and the riot portion. And it will include a location of the route of the protesters and the rioters, the 911 calls and the fire calls. It will be presented at the Public Safety Committee along with this after action presentation. Among some of the areas that we've focused on, but not limited to, are communications, our response itself, equipment, training, command and control, our command staff, our civil disturbance unit, our operations bureau, our patrol, and other entities that were a part of that, and our, obviously, our regional response.
So we, as I understand the game plan here, Chief, is that at the end of this month of September, you're going to submit to the Public Safety Committee a final report.
Yes, sir.
Okay, and then the
Final
committee will have a
report or
chance.
The final report or just the draft before it goes to city council?
Yeah, let me clarify that. It will be a report for us to review and to digest, and then we'll review that report, and then based on that, we'll make a report to city council. Correct?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. Yeah, because Councilmember Seeking's point is right on. It's going to be a report to us, and it's not going to become final until we submit it to city council for city council to review at that point. And there'll be any other questions about how this timeline is going to work. So I'm not sure. We're going to take some time on our part to review it, to schedule a meeting to go over the report. That probably will take place in October, I suspect. And then we can make our report and recommendation to full city council sometime after that process is completed. So any other council members committee members have a question about that process and what we're going to do? Okay, good. All right. So we'll do that, and then we'll proceed from that part on to full council. So, Mr. Mayor, any other comments that you want to add on to that? I want to ask the other council members who are on the call on this, if they have a question, they can ask as well at this point too.
But thank you, Mr. Chairman, for your leadership and for this committee's oversight and review of this after action analysis. I feel like it's very responsible, very thoughtful, very thorough. That was evident when we had a meeting. Was it nearly a month ago? Time flies now. When we
almost 2 months ago, Mr.
We reviewed the communications between our police command staff and those out in the field, and had a timeline that was presented to us. So I think it's critical for this committee to continue that work and that leadership, and thank you for it.
And let me just comment on what the mayor just said. That's 100% within our purview as this committee is responsible for, and I mentioned this earlier at the beginning of the meeting, of our overview and our oversight for police, fire, the municipal court, and emergency management. That's our responsibility. We did have a preliminary report on July 1st from Heather Malloy, based on her review of, I think, 6.5 hours of the communication between the police on channel 3 of their police channels. So we've had a good preview of those communications and what occurred on the afternoon of the 30th through the 31st. We'll get a more updated report sometime later this month, and then we'll bring it to full council. Any other council members who are not on the committee have a question or comment? Jackson, Appel, Griffin?
I
No,
do.
thank you. I'll look forward to seeing the report after you all have reviewed and edited.
Thank you, ma'am. Yes, sir. Councilmember Griffin? Councilmember Griffin?
Yeah, I guess just back to my question. Thank you.
You're fading in and out.
Hello.
Yes, you're fading in and out.
I know I've been kicked out of this meeting a couple of times. I don't know what keeps happening. I keep getting kicked out of the meeting. Yes, I've got a question. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, that's much better.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, like I said, for some reason you are fading in and out. But go ahead, try it again.
Can you hear me now?
That's better.
Hello.
Yes.
Okay. Everybody can hear me? Okay. Thank you.
Yes.
I'm just wondering, back to my question that I asked before, does this committee, I'm just interested in what y'all's opinion is. Does this committee feel like this would be something that would be worthy of having public input in terms of a public hearing on the matter?
As far as having other people comment on the report? Councilmember Griffin?
Hello? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Connection's bad. But y'all can, basically, my point is, I feel like this is bigger than the committee, bigger than the council. I mean, obviously, when something happens for the first time in over 100 years, we're still facing the aftermath of the decision making from everybody on that. Don't you think that my opinion is that we should have a public hearing on the matter so that, business owners can also comment and express their opinions on the matter, and council members can ask questions for response? I'm just wondering what the committee members of your committee, Mr. Chairman, how they would feel about that.
Well, certainly we're going to have, like we're doing right now, the opportunity for council members to ask questions like you're doing right now. And then Councilmember Jackson, Councilmember Appel have made comments about and asked questions. We're certainly going to have that opportunity. Councilmember Jackson, Councilmember Saccharin had his hand up. So let me hear from him first.
Thank you, Chair. Harry, I'm not sure if you can hear me, but I understand the point you were asking, the request that you're making, and the spirit of that. For me personally, I cannot ask important questions, and I don't have the context, the narrative to ask important questions until I get all the information. So once we receive all the information from PD and it's a full action report, I'll support a request to do something a little more transparent, because I have heard from business owners that have additional questions. But I guess the point I'm making, Harry, is until that time comes when I have a full report, I don't know what questions to even ask. So I think we got to get to a point where we get, provided a little more context and a full detailed report.
Thank you, sir, for that comment. Mr. Seekings?
So just very briefly, and I don't know if Councilmember Griffin's still there, I think sort of the order it should go, if that's what this committee is thinking, and I'd certainly support it, is we should receive the report. It will become part of a packet. I assume at that point it will be public anyway. And then I think, Mr. Chairman, you have the discretion although generally our committees don't have public comment periods, as we take up that report, we can have a public comment period during the meeting where that report is taken up. And that probably, I think for purposes of completeness sake and transparency is the best route to follow. If you think it is too, I would support it.
Yeah, that was sort of my feeling as well. I was going to baby step this to be as thorough as we possibly could be thorough. This is our responsibility. This is exactly what this committee is set up to do, to provide this oversight. We've got some very experienced council members on this committee, and very experienced lawyers and law enforcement folks on this who are available to support us and provide input and answer our questions. So certainly are going to be transparent, as we humanly can be, to provide folks to have questions and input into this. But let's baby step this. I want to get the report first. Then as we get the report, that we can discuss how we want to proceed from that once we know what it looks like, and get a feel for it. Councilman Bashealy, you unmuted yourself, so I take that as an opportunity. You want to add a few words as well.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, I'm glad that we've got solid dates on when things are going to happen now and when we're going to have a final report. But I agree with all of you in that we need to get that final report and get all the information. And certainly, if we feel at that time, I'll support it, that we can have some public comment and hear from the public on this. So thank you.
So we got a commitment from the Chief Reynolds to get the report before the end of the month. This is the 8th of September. And then once we get that, then we'll be in contact with the committee, and we'll set up another hearing date. It's not a hearing date, talking like a lawyer. Set up another meeting date, and then we'll proceed from that point. Then we'll come up with some procedures on how we want to handle that report, how we want to digest it. Is that suitable to my committee?
Yes, sir.
All right, we'll do that. Does that answer your counsel, Harry?
I think one of the things, Mr. Chairman, if we do take this through the process and we have a public comment period, we should probably have the meeting at a time where people can actually comment. 1 o'clock on
Sure.
It's sort of tough time.
Well, you know, this is the day after Labor Day, and we have crammed every committee that we possibly could between 1 o'clock and 4:30. So yes, we took whatever time was available. I agree with you.
I get it. And we'll have some time to schedule it out, so we're not stuck with a Tuesday.
Right. I agree with that. Absolutely. Okay. All right. Any other comments or questions from the committee? Any other business we need to pull up? All right. Seeing none, we've actually finished about 15 minutes before I thought we were going to. Yes, sir, Councilman Shealy.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to ask, you know, with some of the storms that are happening around the Southeast and everything, I know in the past we have offered our support to other places. The timing may not be right now, but I didn't know if we had any plans in place. You know, I know Lake Charles is suffering, you know, right now and getting support from other municipalities. I just didn't know. I know in the past we've had plans that if we needed to help a neighboring city, it may, like I said, I know we're hurting right now from different things right now, so the timing might not be right, but I thought I would bring that up and just ask if there is any plans if we have a neighboring area hit by a major hurricane or any other kind of catastrophe.
I'm gonna ask Chief Courier or Chief Reynolds if they know of anything else to respond to Councilman Bashealy's question. I haven't heard of any, Councilman Bashealy. There you are,
So,
Chief Courier. You thought you could get out of this meeting without being called on, so
I was prepping to go. It's a good question. So we have automatic and mutual aid agreements with departments in the state. So if anybody in the state needs assistance, it's only almost a seamless process for us to get resources on the road very quickly. Related to the hurricane that impacted Louisiana last week, Charleston Fire actually, as part of a state deployment, had assets go down, and we had assets in Louisiana for, I believe it was 5 days, and just returned to work this morning.
Great, thank you for that.
thank you.
Likewise, we've since I've been here, have sent people to other parts of the state in that same light, and we're always thinking about others, even in the riot environment, others that might need help, just like we've been helped. So we're always kind of prepared for that. Constantly on the phone with SLED and other groups that have not only via FEMA and other requests, tentacles within the state, but in other areas in this region.
Great, thank you.
Very good. All right. Any other business to come before this committee? Seeing none, I got 10 minutes before the next real estate committee meeting goes into gear. So thank you all very much. And I'll see a good number of you in about 10, 15 minutes, and the rest of you at 4:30. Thank you all very much. We are hereby adjourned.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.